It started on a night that was supposed to be simple. My husband and I had been together for 17 years, married for 12. We had weathered the storms most couples face: job loss, health scares, family drama. But none of it prepared me for this. None of it hinted at how easily something as innocent as a birthday party could fracture the ground beneath me. 2 nights ago, we were invited to a celebration at Jane's house. Jane, my close friend, and the wife of my husband's childhood best friend, had just turned 36. Things hadn't been easy for her lately. Her marriage was unraveling after betrayal, and even though she and her husband were trying therapy, the cracks were obvious. She was fragile, hurting, looking for something solid to cling to. I understood that. I tried to be there for her. The evening started off casually. Drinks flowed, music played, and we laughed like we used to when we were all younger and the world seemed a little more stable. I had one glass of wine. Just one. I wanted to stay clear-headed. I knew Jane would drink more than usual. She needed the release. The others began to leave as the night wore on, until it was just the three of us: Jane, my husband, and me. That was when things shifted. The rooms suddenly felt tighter. Not physically, but emotionally. Tension rose, subtle at first, then almost palpable. They began to joke more freely, leaning into each other's words in a way that was unfamiliar. Flirtatious. I brushed it off initially. They were just being silly, right? Just drunk. I didn't want to overthink. Jane made a joke about needing to be locked in a box, referencing her lack of intimacy. My husband laughed and mock grabbed her throat, saying, "Yeah, I'll lock you up." They both laughed. I forced a chuckle. I told myself it didn't mean anything. It was just a weird joke. Karaoke started. A random guy at the bar sang dramatic love songs to Jane and danced goofily around her. It should have lightened the mood. It didn't. If anything, it highlighted the strange dynamic growing between my husband and Jane. Like they were circling each other in a way that had nothing to do with the music. Later that night, Jane playfully grabbed my husband by the hair and pushed him against the wall. He groaned, not in pain but pleasure. Then he said, "If you do that again, I'll shove my dick down your throat." I laughed. I don't know why. Maybe it was shock. Maybe I was trying to play it cool, pretending that this wasn't spiraling. But deep inside, something cracked. And still I said nothing. He asked me a few times if I was okay. Yeah, I told him. Quick. Automatic. What else was I supposed to say? But why did he keep asking? Did he already know something was off? Was he testing my boundaries, seeing how far he could go before I spoke up? We drove home in silence. Jane didn't want to go back to her place. I understood. Her marriage was a mess. She'd stayed with us before. Nothing unusual. At least, that's what I told myself. Back at our house, the energy only grew stranger. Jane shoved my husband onto the couch, straddled him, and choked him. He liked it. He didn't push her away. He looked at me and said, "This is weird, but I want it." I froze. My mind screamed, but I didn't move. Later, Jane turned to me and said, "He and I don't have chemistry, but we're both really into you." My heart thudded. My stomach twisted. My husband emerged from the bathroom, still laughing. "I just want to pin both of you down and fuck you," he said. Jane replied, "Go fuck my wife." That was when I knew I had to speak. I told them I didn't think either of them would do anything behind Jane's husband's back if they were sober, no matter how much of a jerk he was. I also said I wasn't comfortable with anything happening when alcohol was involved. They both nodded. They agreed. But inside I was lying. I wasn't just uncomfortable with the alcohol. I was uncomfortable, period. I used the alcohol as an excuse because I didn't know how to say, "This feels like betrayal." Later, when I was alone, it all hit me hard. I had dissociated at the bar. I hadn't even realized it until hours later. I'd been watching something unfold in front of me, but I wasn't present. I wasn't part of it. I was a ghost in my own skin. I kept telling myself I didn't need to control them. They were adults, they could make their own choices. But my husband wasn't just another guest at that party. He was supposed to be mine. My partner. The one who respected the lines, not danced around them while looking me in the eye. A few weeks ago, we had already talked about Jane touching his chest while drunk. I told him it made me uncomfortable. He apologized then, said he should have shut it down.
But now?
Now I was wondering, what would have happened if I hadn't been there? Would they have stopped? Or would it have gone all the way? These questions became a whirlpool in my head, pulling me down into something dark and silent. I felt ashamed, and I couldn't explain why. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't touched anyone. But I felt dirty, complicit, powerless. I told him everything the next morning. He was quiet. Then he said he felt terrible, that he was drunk, that he'd crossed lines, that it wasn't what he intended. He apologized. He booked us a session with a couples therapist. And now here I am, lying in bed, writing this, asking the internet to make sense of what happened. Am I overreacting? Am I being irrational? Was I wrong to laugh, to stay quiet, to freeze? Or was I just human, a woman caught off guard, trying to stay composed as something sacred quietly slipped away? The days that followed felt like walking through fog. I tried to convince myself that things would settle, that maybe this was just one terrible night, born from too much alcohol and not enough clarity. But my body told a different story. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the night like a film stuck on repeat, each time zooming in on moments I had brushed aside. His laughter, her hands, my silence. I started questioning everything, not just the night itself, but all the little signs I had ignored before. The times he brushed off my discomfort with jokes. The way Jane always seemed just a little too close. The subtle glances. The inside jokes I didn't understand. And worse, I questioned myself. Why didn't I say something sooner? Why did I laugh when my soul was screaming? Why did I freeze? I told myself that being understanding was noble, that letting people have their freedom was a sign of maturity.
But was it?
Or was I just afraid to be the woman who says, "This is not okay"? I wasn't ready to talk to Jane. Not yet. Every time I thought about confronting her, I could hear her voice saying, "We're both really into you," like it was a compliment, like I should have been flattered. I wasn't. I was betrayed. And my husband, he tried. He texted me from work just to say he was thinking about me. He asked how I was doing. He did the dishes without being asked. He stayed off his phone more. It was like he knew he had shaken the foundation and was trying to patch the cracks before they spread too far. But I couldn't bring myself to smile back. Not fully.
Not yet.
I kept flashing back to the moment when she straddled him, and he looked at me and said, "This is weird, but I want it." How do you forget that? It wasn't the joke that hurt.
It was the want.
I started keeping a journal again. Not the kind you write cute daily entries in, but the kind you scratch your confusion and anger into like it might bleed out through the ink. I wrote every thought that crossed my mind, no matter how ugly or small. I wrote about how I felt like a failure for not screaming. I wrote about how I hated both of them in moments, and how I hated myself more for not knowing what to do. One entry stood out. If someone had told me 2 weeks ago that I'd be questioning the loyalty of the two people I trusted most, I would have laughed. Now, I can't even cry. That night, I finally called my sister. She's always been my mirror, unfiltered, brutally honest. I told her everything. Every detail. Her voice didn't waver. "That wasn't a mistake," she said. "That was testing the waters." The words hit me like a slap. I knew she was right. Maybe it hadn't been premeditated. Maybe they hadn't planned it. But in that moment, with drinks and darkness and blurred boundaries, they didn't stop themselves.
They didn't protect me.
They indulged. "So now what?" she asked. I didn't know. Therapy helped a little. In our first session, the counselor asked my husband to describe the night from his point of view. He admitted he was drunk. Said he remembered some moments, but not all. That scared me more than anything. "So, you don't remember threatening to pin us down?" I asked. He looked blank.
No.
I said that. I nodded. The therapist asked how that made me feel. I couldn't answer. My throat was tight. My heart was pounding. Because the truth was, I didn't feel anything. I was numb. Sometimes numbness is a trauma response, she said gently. Sometimes it means your body is protecting you from something you can't process all at once. That made sense. Too much sense. I left the session exhausted. Not angry, not even sad. Just tired. Tired of holding the weight of everything and still trying to be understanding. That night, I lay beside him in silence. His hand reached for mine. I let him take it, but in my mind I was back at that bar, watching him smile at her, watching her press her body into his, watching myself disappear. The days turned into weeks, and the fog never really lifted. I began to notice how carefully we both danced around the subject. We talk about dinner plans, the dog's vet appointment, bills. But never that night. Never her. Never me. Therapy became our neutral zone. There, we could say things without fear of explosion. Or so I thought. During one session, the therapist asked me to describe the exact moment I felt the most hurt. I said, when he said he wanted it. When he wanted her. When I didn't matter in that moment. My husband didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just stared down at his hands. And then he said, I thought it was just dumb fun. I thought it wasn't serious. I didn't realize how much I was ignoring you. That dumb fun had burned a hole straight through me. I didn't say that. I just nodded. I was getting good at nodding. One night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. We were lying in bed, and I said, Can I ask you something? He turned his head toward me. Anything. If I hadn't been there that night, what would have happened? He hesitated, just long enough for the truth to grow claws. I don't know, he said. That was worse than a yes. Worse than a no. I don't know meant it was possible. That it was in him. That the man I loved, the man I married, considered it. I turned away from him. He tried to pull me close, but I couldn't. My body had become a map of distrust. And he didn't know the roads anymore. I spent more time away from home. Took long drives with no destination. Sat in coffee shops and stared at people who looked happy. Wondered if they had stories like mine under their smiles. Jane texted me 2 weeks after the incident.
Hey, I've been thinking about that night.
I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable. I care about you a lot. I stared at the message for hours. She hoped. She thought about it. But she never apologized.
I didn't respond.
I began to realize that betrayal isn't always loud. It isn't always an affair or a lie or a secret. Sometimes it's a look,
A touch.
a moment when someone chooses someone else, even just emotionally, over you. And I wasn't just grieving what happened. I was grieving the version of myself that trusted blindly, that believed some lines would never be crossed, that believed love always meant safety. We kept going to therapy. Some days were good. We laughed again.
Cooked together.
Slept with our legs tangled. But it always came back to that night. I wondered if I would ever stop measuring things as before and after. Before, I believed we were unshakable. After, I wasn't sure who we were at all. The therapist suggested we do an exercise. We were to write letters to each other, not to be read aloud, but to be shared in silence. I stared at the blank page for hours before writing a single word. I started with, I don't know how to look at you the same way anymore. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was meant to be true. Because love doesn't always disappear in betrayal's shadow backslash. Sometimes it lingers. Limping. Wounded.
Confused.
I handed him my letter without looking at his face. He handed me his without a word. And we both read. In that quiet, I felt years between us instead of inches. He wrote, I miss the way you used to laugh when you burned toast. I miss how you touched my shoulder in the grocery line. I miss how you trusted me enough to fall asleep on my chest. And I hate that I did something to take all that away. I cried. Not the pretty kind of tears. The ugly, sharp ones that come from your ribs, not your eyes. And I realized something. I wanted to forgive him. But I didn't know how to feel safe again. And safety, once broken, doesn't return just because someone says sorry. That night, I slept on the couch. Not out of punishment, but because my body said, not yet. Days passed. Then weeks. Jane stopped reaching out. My husband stopped drinking completely. He cooked more. Cleaned more. Held the dog like a lifeline. But none of it could erase the images seared into my memory. I kept replaying that moment, her on top of him, laughing, his eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. And the worst part was, a part of me understood. I understood the need to feel wanted, to feel powerful, to feel something besides shame or rejection. But why couldn't he need me that way? One morning, he asked, "Do you want me to move out for a while?" I hesitated. My mouth said no before my brain could catch up. But my silence afterwards said more than any answer. He didn't move out, but we existed like ghosts in the same house. We didn't fight. We didn't touch. We just drifted. Like two people shipwrecked on opposite ends of an island. I journaled obsessively. Pages and pages of questions. Was it emotional cheating? Would he have stopped her if I hadn't been there? Was it about sex, or was it about her? Would he do it again? One night, I found a drawing on the kitchen table. A small sketch of me asleep on the couch, covered in a blanket. His handwriting on the back said, "Even like this, you are the most beautiful thing in the room." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared. Because for the first time, I realized he saw the pain. But he didn't understand it. Not fully. Not the way I needed him to. Forgiveness is not a moment. It's 1,000 moments. 1,000 hesitations and choices. 1,000 little deaths of pride, of ego, of certainty. The morning after the drawing, I left the house without a word. I walked to a park 2 blocks away and sat on a cold bench beneath a sycamore tree. The wind was soft, but I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I needed to feel something real. Something that didn't question my sanity or rewrite my memory. A little girl nearby dropped her ice cream. She burst into tears, and her mother knelt beside her, whispering something. The girl smiled through her tears and hugged her mom tightly. I envied that simplicity, that belief that everything could be fixed with soft words and arms around your back. My husband texted, just 3 words, "Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "I don't know." It was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. When I got back home, he was sitting on the stairs. He looked up hopeful. I walked past him and sat on the bottom step. "Do you still love me?" he asked. I didn't answer. Because love wasn't the question.
Trust was.
He added, "I feel like I'm chasing a version of us that doesn't exist anymore." I nodded slowly. "Maybe we both are." He leaned against the railing. "Can we start over?" "Not like this," I said. "We can't pretend that night didn't happen. We can't unsay those words. We can't unsee those looks." He closed his eyes. "Then what do I do?" I said, "You stop trying to fix it like it's a hole in the wall. You sit in it. With me. You let it be messy. Uncomfortable. Real. You let me be angry without defending yourself. You let me cry without asking if we're okay yet. You stop needing me to comfort you for hurting me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Okay." And he meant it. At least for that moment. That week, we canceled all social plans. We turned off our phones at night. We ate in silence or watched old movies with the volume too low. Sometimes we'd laugh. Sometimes we'd cry. Sometimes I'd excuse myself just to sit alone in the bathroom and breathe. One night, I asked him to tell me exactly what he felt that night. No editing. No, I don't remember cop-outs. Just the truth. He said, "I felt seen, wanted, powerful, and completely detached from myself at the same time. It was like I was acting out a version of who I used to be before therapy, before us. Like I was trying on someone else's skin. And I liked the way it fit for a second, but I hated myself the entire next day. And even now." I nodded. "That's the first thing you've said that I believe completely." He looked down. "I wish I could take it all back." "You can't, but you can learn from it. And so can I." The next morning, he made coffee for both of us and set it on the table without a word. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a beginning. A tentative offering. I took a sip and nodded slightly. That nod was all we had, but it was honest. For the first time in weeks, we held hands while walking through the neighborhood. Not tightly, not romantically, but like people who didn't want to lose each other completely. Like we were afraid to let go even if we didn't know what we were holding on to. In therapy, I spoke before he could. I said, I don't want to destroy what we've built. But I can't ignore what was almost destroyed either. He sat beside me, eyes down. The therapist asked him how he felt hearing that. He said, it hurts. Because I know she's right. I betrayed a layer of trust one didn't even realize was there. I thought I was just being wild. Fun. But I was unraveling us. I felt a strange kind of relief. Hearing him say us instead of just me. He saw it too now. What he had done wasn't only about his fun or freedom. It was about both of us. About everything we had quietly built for 17 years. We agreed to try again. Not to go back to normal, but to redefine what normal even meant. We drew up new boundaries together. Emotional ones. Physical ones. Even digital ones. We deleted contacts that blurred too many lines. We made agreements about drinking in social settings. We promised each other brutal honesty, even if it meant hurting one another with truth. The first time we tried to be intimate again, I froze. He touched my shoulder, and I recoiled instinctively. My body remembered that night even when my mind tried to forgive it. I cried, and he didn't touch me again. Not that night. Not until I asked. A week later, I reached for his hand in bed. It felt warm. Familiar. He kissed the back of my palm and whispered, whenever you're ready. We didn't make love that night. But we talked until sunrise. About the first time we met. The first time we kissed. The first stupid fight we had over laundry and the wrong kind of toothpaste. We laughed quietly, beneath the covers, like teenagers hiding from their parents. And in those moments, I remembered why I had loved him for so long. And why part of me still did. We kissed again a few nights later. Slowly.
Carefully.
Like people walking through broken glass. We didn't rush it. And when we finally made love, truly made love, I wept halfway through. He held me, didn't say a word, and just let me sob in the dark. That night, something shifted. Not everything was healed, but something finally began to mend. Days passed, then weeks. There were still landmines. Sometimes we'd be watching a movie and a certain scene would trigger me. Stephen. He would pause the screen without me asking, and we'd just sit in silence. Let the moment pass without pretending it didn't hurt. We didn't avoid the pain anymore. We let it speak. But we also stopped letting it shout over the love. Slowly, I started to see him again. Not the man from that night, but the boy who used to stay on the phone with me until I fell asleep. The man who built our bookshelves. Who remembered how I liked my tea. Who had failed, yes. But who now chose every day to show up and be better. He began to court me again. Little notes left in my purse. Warm socks on cold mornings. An old photo of us slipped into my journal. He didn't ask for sex. He asked for trust. And I began to offer it one piece at a time. I also began to see myself again. Not just the woman who almost lost everything, but the one who stood still while her world spun sideways. Who didn't scream or break things. Who listened to her pain and let it be real. Who knew that healing wouldn't come all at once, but came anyway. One evening, sitting under a blanket together, I said something I hadn't said in months. I love you. He looked at me like I'd just returned from the dead. I love you more than I've ever been able to say, he replied. And this time, I believed him. Because love after betrayal doesn't sound like grand speeches. It sounds like honesty whispered when no one's watching. It looks like showing up on the worst day, not just the best ones. It feels like choosing deliberately, painfully, beautifully to stay. I don't know what our future holds. But I know this. We aren't pretending anymore. We are rebuilding. Carefully, brick by brick, with blood, sweat, tears, and hope. And somehow, even after everything, that's enough.